And George will argue that he never said it, but I feel he did. I know he did. At the beginning of Mad Max Fury Road, he said that he felt that he wanted the audience to sit down, start eating their popcorn, credits sort of roll, whatever credits were involved, and then in the first 3 shots of that movie, he had them. And at the end of the movie, their popcorn hadn't been eaten.
Welcome to Artwell. I'm your host, Jacob Kelly, and this is the podcast where we are on a mission to understand what it means to make great art. Today on the show, we are joined by 5-time Oscar-nominated cinematographer John Seale. John has worked on films such as Witness, Rain Man, Dead Poets Society, The English Patient, which he won the Oscar for cinematography for, Cold Mountain, Mad Max Fury Road, and more. And before we get into today's interview, I want to remind you that if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. And if you want even more from me, you can subscribe to the Artwell newsletter at the link in the show notes. And now, without further ado, I am very excited to present to you my interview with John Seale.
There are no breaks in this business. You make your breaks.
The reason I'm in this room right now is because my music's very dope.
Let's try to find something that people remember 20 years later.
It's super easy to look back and go, oh, well, we should have planned better. I don't know. Tell me the best creative inspiration that was planned for.
Break rules. Leave the world more interesting for your being here. Make good art.
John, I've heard you say that your dad was a talented black and white artist with great composition, and I'm curious what made his composition so good.
It wasn't something that I was conscious of when I started camera operating. And I read all the books available at that time about composition. Cameramen would tell me about composition, why you do this and why you frame that way. It was a time way back then where it was very formal, and we were shooting drama film, in the very formal manner that America had worked very hard to create over many years before. You know, the left and the right, the continuity, where does the crosshairs go to match the intercuts so the editor, can match cut really well. All of that was pounded into us either by the book or by cameramen, continuity girls. They all helped to create this sort of semblance of compositional values for a camera into our minds, all of us young beginners. And that stayed with us for quite a while. And I've got to be honest that it actually has stayed all my career. Say something like continuity, left to right, right to left, the intercutting of two people is very strong. And I do believe in that continuity. There are a lot of lovely old American sayings like the goodies always go left to right because that's the way we read. Things like that I grabbed onto and kind of tried to analyze over the years why that is better. I know that simple answer is we read left to right, but does that affect really your mind when you've got goodies and baddies and chase scenes and whatever? And I think it does, and I like the fact that it does.
You said how, you learned that very early in career. That's kind of like the traditional way of doing things, and you stuck with that for most of your career. Is there anything you kind of did throughout your career to buck the convention?
Oh, well, it came in very slowly as... I always remember the day that Living Camera, a program from America called Living Camera. And I remember I was then an assistant at the television station. And I remember all the cameramen would come in the day after that showed on television and they would be fired up. Like, did you see he walked backwards up the stairs with a handheld camera? And it was like a revelation came into the whole of the camera operating visualization field within our minds, within their minds. And of course, that became their criteria. We were told, though, at where I worked, nobody will take the camera off the tripod. That was that was it. Nobody was going to do it. You'd get fired. But of course they did. They took these things off and they walked around with them, and it was like a freedom that came in. So over the years, there's been an awful lot of those sort of lovely freedom revelations of camera that have come in and not destroyed, but has certainly eaten well into the traditional format of, say, you've always had to have a wide shot, a medium shot, and a close up. Otherwise, the editor couldn't cut it. If the lighting cameraman didn't do a key light and a fill light and a backlight, it wasn't lit correctly. Those sort of formulas slowly slipped away until it became, living camera, or it became available light, which it is today with these fantastic digital cameras. The available light ability is amazing, and it looks amazing to an extent. I think there still needs a bit of work done, but to an extent, it looks amazing. So all of that, I think, has crept into reducing the formality of camera work over the years, and has created this new sort of freedom of expression that visualization can do.
Do you think with that freedom of expression and a little bit of losing the traditional way, there were some good things we've lost along the way as well, kind of in this pursuit of having freedom with the camera?
I think there is. Very personally, I think there is. I mean, I mentioned the continuity. The girls way back when I was learning, they were adamant about left to rights and right to lefts, geographical continuity, situation continuity, the blending of all of those together to create a sort of a harmonious movement of the visuals that we created in the camera, that the editor could then grab hold of and maintain that fluidity. And I'm a great believer at the moment in putting the audience into a comfortable position that they're not watching a movie, they're in it. They're actually there. And to do that, a lot of these older philosophies, I feel, come to bear, especially the continuity. Number one, that if that flow of continuity is correct and formally correct, it in my mind, over many, many films and years of looking through cameras, I feel it makes the audience feel comfortable, that what they're listening to, what they're watching is real, and they're actually in the room. So it's that lovely thing of making an audience so comfortable that they drift up out of their seat and they drift through our virtual window, which is the screen, into another world that's been written and we're now creating, and they're actually in it. And as long as you keep them there, I feel that that's going to be a very enjoyable film. If you break it in any way, that rhythm that you've created of fluidity of images and sound and through editing, they'll go shaboom back into their seats, start eating popcorn. You've lost them, in my mind. This came to bear later on, and George will argue that he never said it, but I feel he did. I know he did. That he said, "I want everybody to sit down at the beginning of Mad Max Fury Road, which I think is one of the best action films ever written and directed, and why George didn't get the best director and best film for that, I'll never know. But he said that he felt that he wanted the audience to sit down, start eating their popcorn, credits sort of roll, whatever credits were involved, and then in the first 3 shots of that movie, he had them. And at the end of the movie, their popcorn hadn't been eaten. And he cut it and edited it so quickly. He made the human brain work to its maximum. I think the average length of shot was 57 frames, which is, just over 2 seconds. That's the average length of shot in that movie. So by writing that movie, doing the storyboards on it, the visualizations of it, and he was a continuity addict too. He made pretty well sure that everything was flowing left to right, right to left, agreeing, so that the edit would work. It would keep the audience comfortable, and by the end of that movie, they hadn't eaten their popcorn was his great desire, and I loved that. I loved that. I thought that was one of the the best films I could ever end my life in film on.
You said you wanted it to be those first 3 shots of the film that got the audience up into the screen. What do you think it is about those first 3 shots that allowed them to transport into the wasteland?
A lot of it was the memory of earlier Mad Max films 20 years earlier, and the close-up and the track-in and the close-up of the supercharger on top of that V8 motor firing into gear. Certainly it wasn't the first shot, if I remember. I think it was the wide shot, the little lizard, double-headed lizard, to give you an indication that things are wrong in nature that go along, and then Max eats it, then the motor starts. But it's when the motor starts, that movie to me started to roll and did not stop. And I think the memories of earlier Mad Max movies with that shot in it, and the fact that the roar of that V8, the sound of it, which George worked very hard to create, all of that combination grabbed that audience and said, "Here we go. We're in for a ride and we're off." And that was when the popcorn stopped being eaten, I think.
I know your approach when you go from film to film is to kind of try to forget everything you knew about any previous films you'd worked on to come in with a blank slate. But when you were doing pre-production on Fury Road, did you go back and watch the previous Mad Max films to get a sense for how they were framing those films? Or did you come in completely without going back to watch the old Mad Max films?
No, I didn't watch the old films. I have seen them all years ago, but I didn't catch up with them because in regarding every film as a new film, different, that I've never worked on, which I hadn't done any of the Mad Maxes, I kept my brain clear on that. But also, George and his storyboard artists had spent literally years drawing up the storyboards which created the film. When I arrived taking over, there was no script at all. I said, "Can I read a script on this?" And they said, "Well, we haven't got one." And I said, "Well, what do I do?" And they said, Up into the conference room, start the top left on the storyboards. You go right round the room and finish on the bottom right down there. That's the film. So I went up and I couldn't understand any of it. They were all little close-ups and then wide shots and things. I thought, I don't really know what's happening out of the storyboards. So that was the way this Mad Max, for me, never having done a Mad Max, was a new film for me. So I kept it all clean, kept the slate clean, and just went in and explored what I found out of the information that I was given.
You almost worked on a Mad Max though, right? I believe you were in contention for Mad Max 2. You interviewed for it, right?
Oh, I did. I did. That was a long time ago. I was a fledgling cameraman in Australia. I'd started to do lighting after doing years of operating. And I got called up to meet George. And I knew George is a very astute man. He's a doctor, for God's sake. So George, I think, knew in his talk with me that I wasn't ready to make the film that he wanted to make. And I have no regrets with that. I honestly, deep down, I know he made the right decision way back then to go with Dean Semler, who's a great cameraman. And I think a lot of it was that George was able to anticipate that I was not ready in my brain as a cameraman, as a confident cameraman, to go and make the film that George wanted to make. And I've never regretted that with George ever, because I think it was exactly the right decision to make. He made it, and years later we got together. So that was the way the way I think I gained strength in and confidence. And then years later, he asked me to go and work for him. So that was a lovely little roundabout that occurred.
But you came into the production late, right? Because it was originally Dean Semler, I believe, and he steps out, and then you come in late into pre-production on Fury Road?
I came in very late, really, when I think about it now. George was in the see, another fascinating thing about George was that he wanted to do 3D, and the studio wanted to shoot Fury Road 3D. And I'd been working enough and reading enough to know that 3D was okay in projection maybe, but to shoot it was a nightmare. Giant cameras with 2 lenses, and they had to be calibrated to line up to match, and it was all very high-tech stuff with a lot of possible problems that may delay production, that would, out in the desert, particularly with sand and stuff going into cameras and, protection of cameras just became a bit of a nightmare, but they had it, and I love a challenge. So when I got there, I got straight into the 3D thing. Quickly realized that even though they'd spent a couple of years building the cameras, they still needed a lot of work, a lot. I felt a lot of work to be able to maintain a production shoot for 8 months. George had those fantastic ideas. Like somebody said to George, now, George, when we change lenses in there could be quite a long delay because 2 lenses have got to go in and they've got to be calibrated and lined up exactly on, a lot of goes on. And George said, well, how can we solve it? And I don't know how it happened, but somebody might have joked and said, well, if we had a camera for each lens, then we wouldn't have to change the lenses. And whether or not, and I could almost see it happening, George saying, do it. So when I arrived, I think there were 24 cameras. We were going to have the biggest camera truck in the world. It would have to have been a big semi-trailer to carry 24 cameras. But that was George's mind thinking, why go through that bother when you're shooting? If we want to change a lens, change the whole camera. Just unplug it, put a new one on the tripod or the whatever, plug it in, and we're ready. And a mechanic could be in the truck and could be lining it all up, making sure all cameras are constantly lined up with temperature changes or whatever occurs in the desert, that he can fix those so they're all aligned when they go on. I thought that was fantastic. I thought that was top thinking of the way. And later, the problem came up with George about the alignment. If it goes out of alignment, George, do you want to watch on your monitor 3D or 2D? And it was like, well, why? And they said, well, if you go 3D, we've got to align the lenses perfectly. But if you go 2D, we can let you see 2D with one lens, and later in post with algorithms, we can realign it and do the 3D in post. And he said, 2D, I'll watch it in 2D. Things like that I found with George were just fantastically crazy, perfect, and logical, the way he thought. I mean, there's money there, obviously, to build 24 cameras of your own is crazy, but the money was there. So he was doing it. But it's the logics I loved. And I think those logics pervaded into the storyboards of the flow of continuity, the size of lenses, how the edit would go, how the action, how long is that shot? So much of it was pre-planned. There wasn't a necessity really to go back and watch other films, older films. It was a new film, and it was totally new. And then one day, George walked into the meeting on a Monday morning in pre-production. We had about 2 months to go. And he said, I've got some news. He said, we're going 2D, not 3D. And all the 3D cameras went into a locker, and we pulled out 2D cameras from Panavision and went off and shot it in 2D and did a 3D post. So he's not enamored necessarily with a certain system that he feels will make his film. He's very quick to adapt and change to suit the situation. I mean, I think he knew that our schedule was long as it was, but if it had delays with 3D camera problems or any kind of camera problems on set, that would be detrimental. So I think that he does the circle, creates what he'd love to use and have, but if problems occur, he very quickly, I think, and logically changes to keep his production running.
And when it came to filming it, you said the average shot length, I believe, 57 frames, you said, around 2 seconds?
59, 57, 59, yeah.
I've heard you say in the past that, so with shots being that short, like none of them are gratuitous. Like George knew exactly what he wanted the entire film. What makes a shot gratuitous?
I think watching films, especially action films, I think, there was a time when, and I think we still do it a bit, is we seem to shake the camera gratuitously to create possibly visual energy. I think we go into long lenses that blur out, can't understand what's going on, but intercut with action that can be understood. It's a theory, I think, that is there that creates a visual energy. And George doesn't do that. George does it, he makes every shot count. If it doesn't count, he actually analyzes why. And he'll use every technical offering in post to make it work, from stretching it out, from slowing it down. He won't lengthen the shot to make it understood necessarily. He will work inside that length of shot. So if a shot is 8 seconds long and somebody says, I don't quite understand what that shot's doing, what is it saying? He will then look at it and he'll either slow it down. I mean, something like 80% or maybe even more of Fury Road is running at less than 24 frames a second. He has slowed it all down, and some of it's he speeded up, but some he slowed down. So, not 85% of the film is not running at 24 frames a second, which is your normal cinema speed. So he's by doing that, he's shortening and strengthening shots by speed of the shot. So if he slows it down, then it's understood, but it's still only 7 seconds long or 8 seconds long. So I love that theory. I loved also the theory that there's a feeling that the brain is so fast at understanding what's in the frame, is so fast, the brain, that you don't need to extend the shot to explain it. The brain's already analyzed what the shot is. And obviously by doing that, I feel it's understood the purpose of the shot as well. And of course, George doesn't stop there. He then gets us to center frame everything as camera operators, so that on the anamorphic frame, which is so wide, if you're putting people in the left frame, right frame, which is the old formula technique where you crossed over, he put them all in the center because he was going to cut it so fast. He didn't want the eye to have to waste a split second traveling across the frame to find the face or the point of interest. It was already there in the center on the cut. And I loved that too. It was painful as an operator to do it because your instinct is to frame the entire frame as an anamorphic frame. But no, it it's and George says he didn't say it, and I'll say it again, that the call was, "Put the red dot on her nose," the lovely Charlize's nose. That was his way of speeding up the audience's reaction to the very short cuts that he knew he was gonna put in the film. So all in all, George's Fury Road, I thought, was just amazing overall for a technician working on it, but for an audience as well, an amazing piece of filmmaking.
Is there a day on set that stands out to you from making Fury Road?
Every day. Every day was very exciting to go to work with George, because some of the setups and the shots and the stunts were so extraordinary. Just being there was as a filmmaker, just being there was enough. But to be asked to shoot it as well was like amazing because of all of these innovations of George's. And we had our problems. Gosh, you don't go to the desert and not have problems. So we had those to combat, but we were ready for a lot of them, most of them, in fact. So it was a revelation every day going to work with George and doing a film like Fury Road was like, we shouldn't have been paid, really.
Can you tell me about that shot where Furiosa or Charlize falls to her knees and screams? I feel like it's in the last 10 years, it's become such an iconic shot.
It was a moment where George wanted, obviously, the Furiosa character to walk away totally distraught. Now, as I've already said, George's work in post is 1,000%. Every shot is analysed as to how it can be improved to force the emotion of that character into the audience. So we did that shot. We used multiple cameras, and we had a tracking crane shot down below on the edge of the sand dune, tracking with Charlize, but we also had the center framed figure walking away from, which psychologically I loved. I mean, it's like she's walking away from the fact that the green place doesn't exist anymore. Where does she go? Out into the desert, and she walks away, not on her face, on her back, and she's dropping away the apparatus she's built to replace her arm. She drops that. It's like she's going into almost a naked, defenseless, I don't know what to do. So, but to add to it, again, George added the sweeping sand, the wind-blown sand, to say, that the image was good as we shot it, but it's even better if the wind is blowing the sand, the shifting sands of life is blowing away under her feet, and across. So simple as it was as a shot, when you looked at it on a storyboard, it looked simple. But in fact, it's a very complex emotional shot. And the length of it, the adding of the wind-driven sand, the shooting of her back as she walks away, and the dropping away of apparatus that makes her her arm. All of that is a very emotional moment within the film, and George, I think, sucked it dry exactly in exactly the right manner, the simplicity of it. And I think a lot of filmmaking is that simplicity. I think the audience, it needs to be carried up into the screen where the emotion is and become part of that emotion. And to keep them there, you do shots like that, because that is the simplicity of emotion. And the audience, I think, would have appreciated that, what she's going through by that simplicity. There's not, if you tried to jazz it up in any way, I think you'd lose the quiet, solid emotion that she was portraying.
I was listening to, I don't know if you know, familiar with Rick Rubin, the music producer, but he was saying, I was listening to an interview of his, and he was saying how oftentimes the least amount of instruments you can use to convey the emotion is best. Like if you convey the emotion with just one guitar, that's going to get the emotion across more so than if you have guitar, piano, drums, all this other stuff. Like the simplest form is the best way to convey emotion.
Oh, look, I so agree with that, and it's lovely to hear that because, I feel that's, having discussed that shot is exactly right. The simplicity of the shot and the music, keeps the audience right on the edge of the conveyance of that coming off the screen, and that, I think, keeps them in the film, totally. And, I've gotta be honest, my admiration for music men around the world that have worked, in collaboration on films, I am so enamored with those music men. I cannot work out how they can hear the emotion, the visual, how they can hear the emotion of a visual. They look at the film and they can hear music that suits that. I love them.
Has anyone ever interpreted the emotion of a shot differently than you would have expected with the music?
Oh, yes, that has happened, a couple of times. I've thought, "Oh, that's interesting putting that on." It's I mean, I've sat in on quite a few of those because it's such fun, listening to the director and a music man, and recording the music when it should be a little higher or a little lower. It's all, a very almost emotional job for them getting that moment exactly right. But sometimes there's, well, most of it's the revelation of when you go to see a film that you've helped to make, that you've photographed, and you see the end result if you haven't been in the music and you're not there the whole time either. Suddenly the whole film takes on a whole new and different emotion that you felt you were helping to create visually. And then the music, of course, is like adding the sauce on the top to really make, the emotion of the images complete. And that's where I can't work out how they do it. They're magical, those people, and, their power of being able to, well, to get hold of and and create an emotion in people that makes them cry. The audience cry, which is stunning, absolutely stunning, because if that's what the film needed at that moment, that combination has obviously worked, and that's where I feel again that audience has been sucked up into the virtual world that we've created, and the music is a big, big stepping stone into that world.
Is one thing to be a really technical cinematographer. It's a whole other thing to be able to shoot two people speaking against a brick wall and to make someone cry.
Exactly, exactly. It's also the fact that it doesn't matter how long you've been in the film industry helping to make films, you learn on every film because the brilliance of it is that every film is so different. Generally, there's some are get a bit of a similarity to them, but mostly they're all, lovely and different and should be approached that way. So I feel that, and I try to say to students, learn your photography. It used to be photography. I don't know what it is now. It's pixel collecting, but it is still photography, just using a different negative. But I try to say to students, learn that. And then when you get to the top of the hill that you're climbing, for God's sake, learn it to the peak, learn your photography. Then when you tumble down the other side, like Jack and Jill, go make movies with that knowledge. But don't control the movies with that knowledge because The movie's a far greater, bigger thing than the photography. To me, the cameraman is one of the many cogs that spin around that central drive shaft, which is the writer and the director. And you're on the set and you're photographing it. The sound man's recording sound and the makeup and the hair and the wardrobe and the props, set decorators, designers. They're all in there making the same film, and you are just simply part of that. So your photography is almost, you don't throw it away, of course, but you use your photography to satisfy what you hope is the director's vision, coming out of the writer's vision of the script and the interpretation of all of that, and you are agreeable to it. Because as a camera operator, I spent a lot of time camera operating for directors of photography, and there were some who were there just to photograph and pick up the paycheck at the end of the week. And directors would say, big directors would say to me, "Oh, yeah, I made a mistake on that film. I should have gone with somebody else." And I never asked why, but they sometimes would tell you why. And the reasons were awful, I felt, as a cameraman. I felt it was sad because their desire, the cameraman's desire was to be simply the photographer. Tell me what you want and I'll shoot it. Not, what if? What if we lowered the camera a little so that, what if, you know, building the shots for the director to be able to be edited into the movie that he wants, I think is what the photographer, cinematographer should be all about. Not the photography particularly, select the lenses, select everything, then go shoot the movie. And if the director suddenly wants you to shoot that way, that's front lit, and not that way because it's backlit, there's a reason. And I saw that. I saw cameramen fighting with directors. I used to go and have a sleep in the camera truck because they would argue for an hour and a half about which angle was better. And I'd think to myself, I would shoot the director's angle because I'm paid to make that work. And it shouldn't necessarily be pretty. Why should it be pretty? If the director wants that angle, he wants the ugly end of the alleyway, not the backlit pretty end of the alleyway, to emotionally tell his story. So I would think to myself, I will always go out and shoot what the director wants. I mean, it's a discussion, of course, but if the director says, "No, I love that building and that grill in the gate," or whatever, then you say, "That's his movie. Let's go shoot it." So you shoot it to the best of your ability. And I think that's, in my way, I try to say to students, that's the way I did it. But you don't have to. You do it your way because you're the individual. But that's the way I did it.
How do you establish a relationship and trust with the director to be able to give them suggestions like that?
I think it's the bottom line. You see, I always took a lot of time off between films so I could clear my brain of the last one and go into the next one with a new open mind, almost open enough to say, this is the first movie I've ever shot. The innocence of that. So that maybe it was part and parcel of being enthusiastic of that script with not pushing a photographic style to that script that came out of your mind from other films. I hoped I cleared that and was enthusiastic about the film, not the fact that the photography would, well, as in some cases when I was camera operating, they would say, one cameraman said, "I'm only here to get an award." And I thought, well, he should be fired because we're making a movie, and he should be fired because he's just cruising, and you can't cruise. If you're gonna make movies, you're there to make movies. And I always felt, people would say to me, what's your favorite movie?" And I'd always say the next one. I can't do that now, I've got a new life, but I'd always say the next one because once you've finished one, clear your brain, the next one's going to be exciting. Don't know where it'll come from or when, but when it does, it'll be exciting, you know. So I think maybe a little bit of that carried over. I will be honest. I think maybe word of mouth in the system helps a lot. If people say, "Yeah, he's all right," he doesn't dribble too much and doesn't go to the toilet every 10 minutes. Um, and he's cheap. He keeps a small camera package, works fast, seems to get on with everybody. Yeah, you'd probably be fine. He'll be all right. I think that's part of the system as well. In all honesty, I think that does go on, and that pays a lot of dividends. And I don't think it's brought out by acting that part. I hope to feel that it was a genuine appraisal of somebody who was enthusiastic about making films, and that recommendation was born out of that rather than acting out an enthusiasm of, you know, of making films.
What was your approach for picking projects then? Like, what drew you into a script? Why would you decide to make a film?
Well, I I I will admit I would sit down with the script and make sure there was no interruptions at all, and I would read it through at what I thought was a normal speed of film watching, and at the end of it, would close the script and think, if I'd paid $18 to sit in a seat, would I have enjoyed that? And if I could say yes, then a lot of the time I did like to find out which actors might have been signed up. And often they'd say, "Oh, so and so's been signed up," and I'd think, "Yes." And that happened on quite a few occasions because I felt that that actor, and one of them I really liked him, and we got on well and became a friend actually, even though we lived in different countries, and he was a brilliant actor. He, if he'd read it and liked it and signed on, and I liked it if I'd paid $18 for the seat, uh, I kind of thought, I'll do that one. And I know a couple of times it mightn't have worked too well, but 99% of the time it worked really well.
Yeah, your filmography is unbelievable. You know, when I was watching movies to prepare for this episode, I didn't have time to watch everything, you know? Dead Poets Society, Rain Man, obviously Mad Max, Lorenzo's Oil, Harry Potter 1, Perfect Storm. Like, I could go on and on and on. Um, do you ever sit and think about your filmography in its entirety? Was that part of the thought process when picking films?
No, never, never. The one thing I was worried about was that I did find when I first started shooting in America, particularly, they they seem to classify you. Well, he's good at action films, or he's good at cop films or emotional love stories. Th and I was wary of that because I really felt that a cinematographer should be able to handle all situations for the director, and I won't say that I deliberately tried to be diverse, but I did do a couple of big action films. One of them I shouldn't have, but there's a lot of films in there that I shouldn't have done, and there's a lot that I should have, that I didn't do. But, the diversity of it I loved. I mean, I loved working with Rob Reiner on the American President. Rob and I had the funniest conversation. He rang me direct here in Australia, and I love that straight away that he rings you direct. The man rings. And we had a fun. I said to him, I was a bit embarrassed about it because it was such an American film, and I was an Australian. And I said to him to him, I just said, "Now, Rob, you sure you don't want America to shoot this?" And he was lovely. He said, "Why? Why? Why?" I said, "Well, I'm an Australian." He said, "I don't care. I want you to shoot the film." I loved him. So I love doing that film. I love doing Fury Road. I love doing Harry Potter. That was came very quickly and suddenly. And things like that happen, and you think, "Gosh, yes, I'd love to do that one." Whether you've read about it, you've read the book, or The English Patient comes up, and you read the book and you think, "Oh my God, how is Anthony going to write a screenplay out of that?" And that became almost the challenge. But I just knew that out of that book, how, there was an amazing film was going to come out of that. So things like that happened, but I did love the diversity. I loved the madness of doing Fury Road, say, as a big action film, but I love I love doing Dead Poets Society with all those young actors, acting their socks off for Peter Weir. Robin Williams, what a man, to work with. The privilege to have worked with Robin Williams in that film will stay with me for all my life. It really will. He was just such a lovely, lovely, delightful man, and very sad. But so that's really my life, yeah, my film life, yeah, the diversity of it.
Did you ever pursue films? Like, I know Perfect Storm was one you said, if this gets made, I want to shoot it. But was there ever anything else that you went after to shoot, or did most of the work come to you?
Most of the work came to me. I will be honest there. A Perfect Storm is I've always said was a known example. When I read the book, and being a yachty who's travelled offshore and been through some storms and whatnot, I just thought, when I read that book, I thought, God, if anybody makes a movie of that, I'd love to help try and make it for them. And yeah, my agent 18 months later said, you better sit down, and I've got some news. You've got it if you want it. Wolfgang would like you to do it. I had met Wolfgang. I was very wonderfully invited to a end of production party at Harrison Ford's agent's house in LA. I happened to be there at the time, and that wonderful continuity girl, she Diane Dreyer from New York, and she invited me as her date, and we'd worked together, and I'd worked with Harrison on 2 films. So I went along, and it was great. It was a hail-hearty well met with Harrison, and we talked a lot there, and I met Wolfgang there, and I think that sort of dotted the I a long time later when Perfect Storm came up. There have been other films that I would love to have done with certain directors. Some I got interviewed for but didn't get, and one I was very, very disappointed in, but that's life. And others I think I won from other people, which made them disappointed. So the industry's full of that ups and downs of disappointments. But there were a couple of directors I really would have loved to have worked with, maybe in another life.
Who's one of the more underrated directors you've worked with? You've worked with so many great ones. Who's someone who's a little more underrated?
I always thought Robert Harmon on The Hitcher, which was the second film I was asked to help make in America. And I thought what he did on The Hitcher at the time was very interesting, because the film was lambasted as a dreadful horror movie, front double page spread in the LA Times. Who could make this movie? It's so dreadful. But the way he directed that movie made it one of the most interesting horror movies I think ever made. I had a woman come up to me and say, "You shot The Hitcher." And I said, the tone of voice, I knew I was in trouble. I said, "I did." And she said, "That is the most dreadful film ever made." I said, why do you say that? Why do you say that?" And she said, "You tore that poor girl apart." I said, "Did you see that?" And she said, "I saw every bit of it, where she was tore apart." And I thought, we got that woman because you never see her. It's all a lovely piece of editing, of close-ups, and then a lot of noise when the music comes in, or the noise combined with music. And she closed her eyes. I know what happened. She closed her eyes and she saw in her mind's eye Jennifer Jason Leigh torn apart. And I thought, yes, that's good movie making. That's the best, because the horror is in your own mind, not in what you actually see. So I felt that he went on and did a lot of stuff, but I did feel over the years that I was waiting for his name to pop up, you know, with some very much more films that were of his making, and um, it didn't quite happen. So I don't know why, but I think what he did on The Hitcher was so amazing.
When you did make the jump to America for the first time, is there nerves that comes with that?
Oh, I was terrified because it was way back in 1982, and we were the industry. The camera industry was starting to change. It was going from basically a formula method of shooting that the Americans had created, as we talked earlier, and it was moving into a looser, freer sort of more handheld and, more sort of documentary in a way combination of movie making. But I mean, to fly over and walk into a studio, an American filmmaking studio that was a dream when you were a young learner, and meet a producer that, you know, Ed Feldman had to be one of the loveliest men you could ever meet. But still, it was an American producer. And then we flew over to Pennsylvania, and I met Harrison. Harrison was just Mr. Indiana Jones, and whatever. He was a big star. Well, again, back in Australia, we had big stars, but they were our big stars. They were, sort of lovely Australians that had a beer with you at the end of the day. And but this was Harrison Ford, and I was I was very nervous about all of that. In fact, and with the crew, and I've got to be very honest that one of the crew, a lovely, lovely guy from New York, just jogged me on the way I was shooting a scene. And there were two ways you could shoot the scene. The available light was fantastic in a barn. And I thought, this is great. If we only need one little fill light and we can shoot that scene, 3 shots. And I knew Peter Weir, our great director, I knew Peter had 3 shots on it. And I rushed around after lunch trying to get everybody right because the sun was moving and I was relying on that sun to maintain. But I couldn't kind of get people organised, and Peter arrived and got it organised, and we shot it, available light, basically. But this young man from New York, he said, why didn't you tent the whole barn?" I said, "Oh, you've got to be joking. What, and put gantries out there with arc lights through it?" He said, "Yeah." And I thought, why? Why would you do that when you've got available light? But he said, "Insurance." Means if delays occur, delays with the actors or the whatever, if delays occur, your light's gonna go and you're not gonna have what you wanted. But if you tended it and lit it, you got what you want. And I thought, maybe I'm doing all this wrong. So I went to Peter, who was a very, very astute man, obviously, said that to him. I don't know whether I'm doing this right. And he sussed it straight away. And the wonderful line that he gave me, which stayed with me for the rest of my life, anywhere in the world, was he just looked at me and he said, Johnny, he said, this is an Australian film. And we're treating it as an Australian film. It's just that 99% of the people here have funny accents. Otherwise, it's an Australian film. And I thought, done. So that's the way we made with Peter Weir, with even Anthony Mangello, the English director. We made the films the way we wanted to make them, and in a style that we wanted to make them, as to how we made them, and dropped away basically this feeling of insurance that would cost the company thousands of dollars to tent a barn, put gantries in, cherry pickers, arcs, and shoot it the next day. And you've lost a day and a half shooting. It's cost that much to do it all. Forget it. If you can get in and shoot at available light and get the support you need, then you can do it a lot better.
Is part of your quote unquote, I know you approached every film differently, but your style, the way you want to shoot a movie, do you think that is born out of the low budget stuff you were doing early on in your career at the ABC?
Oh, very much so. Very much so. Mainly because it worked. The early Australian films we made without any money on what we used to call a what-if system. What if we do this? What if we do that? Or you're really running on in a marathon and you've got to shift around. We had very low budgets, no schedule. I mean, whatever the schedule was worked out was the budget, and that was it. We never went over schedule. So we had to shoot fast. We had to shoot within the budget. Over time, in all honesty, was a slab of beer, one beer out of the box for everybody at the end of the day was overtime payment. We didn't get money, but we did it. And we did it happily because the film needed it. And we knew that if we did it for a beer, they'd save the money and they might make another film in 2 years' time and they'd book us up on it and we'd get the work. So it was all part of a training over many years of shoot fast, shoot economically, keep your equipment economical, and go for it. Go make the movie. Go make the movie. And that way you might make another movie because you saved a lot of money and time and whatnot. So yes, it stayed in my mind all my life. And I'll be honest, I don't think it hurt. I think that's where in America, when I went into the office hat in hand to try and get 3 cameras instead of 1, I was able to say, I'll only need 1 box of prime lenses and 3 zoom lenses. And that's my equipment, camera equipment. Because a lot of other people would get a box of primes for every camera, a box of lenses, zooms for every camera. I only got 3 zooms and 1 box of primes, and away I went and made big movies. So things like that help. And I do say to students, because I was told in America when I first started there, things like, "Oh, don't worry about it. Tell them you can't shoot it today because the light's not right, and we'll come back tomorrow." And I'd say, "I can't do that. We're on schedule." And they'd say, "They've got the money. Don't worry about it." And I just could not come to grips with it. I thought, no, that's not right. I'm here and paid to make this lousy light work in continuity or appearance or to suit the story. That's what I'm paid to do. I'm not paid to say I can't shoot it. I'm paid to shoot it. Let's go. And I'm on a schedule. So all of that was, yes, an apprenticeship that stayed with me the whole time.
What's something you learned from Bill Gribben that stuck with you your whole career?
Oh, lots of things from Bill. He was an amazing mentor, great camera operator. There were a whole lot of lovely things. Most of them were the American formula, but he was that sort of person that was very quick to say, but think about it, you don't really need it. You could go this way or you could do that. He instilled a lot of enthusiasm because his love of making films came over, and it was a continual sort of, not spoken in a way, but a continual lesson in the enthusiasm of what we're doing. There's no other job like it. I remember once I was operating and I really had to go to the bathroom. And I said, Bill, I've got to go to the bathroom. And he said, go, I'll do it. I'll do the rehearsals. And I ran all the way to the toilet. He watched me and he came back. He never said anything. He never said anything for years. And then one day we were just talking and I said to Bill, thank you so much for sort of taking me under your wing and getting me through an amazing time of my life. And he said, when I look around and a young man says, I want to go to the bathroom, and he's the camera operator and he's on a very important position on that crew, and he runs to the bathroom and runs back again, he said, I know which way to go after that. So it's that enthusiasm, and I try to, I hope, instill that in students and camera crew and stuff like that. The enthusiasm of being asked to be where you are on a movie set is just amazing.
There's a quote that's very similar to that story. It was about James Cameron when he worked for Roger Corman. I think it was Roger Corman who said, you ask people to go get you something on set. Some people walk to go get it. Some people run. James Cameron ran to get you whatever you needed. And so it's just very similar to the story that you're telling me, is whether it be running to the bathroom or getting your shots, speed was always a factor. It was always something you would do. You were fast. And for you, I think was Dead Poets the fastest movie or the most setups you were doing in a day? I think you're doing over 20 a day on Dead Poets.
No, not the fastest. Some of the early Australian films, when I was working on those low budgets, we really went like hell for leather. But on an American production, yes, overseas production, bigger budget, lots of characters to deal with, yes. And it was we were just in that. Well, I was in that transition changeover between only shooting films with one camera rather than two or three or four or six or eight, which I enjoyed later. But certainly with Dead Poets, the one camera and shooting that fast was a requisite from Peter. Again, there's that little bit of strings attached to the past of budget and schedule. And Peter, even doing Dead Poets in America with a studio, and after the success of Witness as nominations or box office, whatever, he still honoured the schedule for speed, but knew he had to have a film photographed well enough so that in edit, covered enough in edit to get the movie, the emotional movie he wanted. And I remember he said, Johnny, we're not slow. I know that. But he said, I've got to move along really quickly. I've got 7 boys and a girl, and I want enough material on each one to edit the film to the utmost capacity of that emotion of each character. And I said, let's go. And so we just hammered. Interesting to see that you do that film going very quickly. And I took the same camera crew onto Rain Man, which was exactly the opposite. It was so slow, we were doing 30 and 40 takes almost of every shot. Whereas on Dead Poets, take one, print, moving on. So that I tell students, be ready. Don't think that every film's the same as far as that's concerned. One film, you're going to get the director saying, need to move as quickly as possible, and you do. You have to. And the next film is so slow that, you could go to sleep between takes. And do 30 of them is such a difference. And I'll say now there's less out of focus stuff with that focus puller. There's less on Dead Poet Society where we moved along quickly, where all your senses are up high. You're on guard the whole time. Your brain's going bang, 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 bang to get those shots in. The slower one, it's like, no, don't worry, we'll do another one. We'll do another 10 takes. So if it does end up a little soft or, a little twitchy in focus, no, it doesn't matter, we'll do another 10. But always, the trouble is, even on Dead Poets Society, the one shot that's out of focus in the movie. And I said to Peter, not Dead Poets, sorry, in Witness, there's one shot that's out of focus. And I learned out of this. And I know we did 4 or 5 other takes on the boys standing on the toilet. And we did another 4 or 5, and I know they were sharp. There was only one sock take, and that's in the movie. And I said to Peter, we did 4 or 5 other shots that were sharp. He said, no performance. All the performance was in the out of focus shot. So I tell students now, I say, there's your problem. The edit, you can say that shot wasn't good, and I'll say, well, let's do another one. But I'll tell them, don't forget, it's been recorded. And if the editor and the director go through it in post looking for the optimum performance and they find it in the out of focus one, they're going to use it and your name's on it. So make every shot count. I just keep telling them all the time, get that enthusiasm up, get it going and make it work every time. Otherwise, you're not going to look the best up on the screen. So I think the enthusiasm of making films is all of that. Doing a great job, doing the right job, satisfying, making actors comfortable. My God, that's one of the most important things we can do. I used to put, like in the old days, we'd put marks on the ground for focus and the actor, because you used hard Fresnel lighting and the actor had to hit the mark. And after a while, we went to colour and we used bounce lighting. And the bounce lighting meant that you didn't have to really hit a solid mark. You could be quite a bit off it, But the focus pullers complained to me. And I said, well, and then the mark became, as we all know, those lovely stories of this actor Spencer Tracy, who made a living out of looking at his mark, but not making it look as though he's looking at his mark. And actors, I found their mark to hit became more important than the movie. I could see them concentrating on hitting the mark, and I thought, this is ridiculous. We can't be doing this. So I took the marks away. And the focus pullers nearly lynched me, because now they didn't have a mark on the floor. I said, well, stick your focus marks on the floor, but they're not actors' marks. So if the actor hits a certain one of your marks, well, you've got it. So we did that for years, and afterwards, now they don't do it at all. So they don't do marks. But it was all to make the actor more comfortable within the environment of the shooting set, that actually, their characters in a reality rather than a set was trying to make it as comfortable as possible.
What are some other ways you made the set comfortable for the actors?
I tried a lot. I tried, early in the days when we used to use geared heads on big cameras, big film cameras, if an actor was standing or sitting down, they'd often throw their head down, then they'd sit, and it'd be like a fold. Whereas the Hollywood sit was one where the actor would learn to just go straight down. So then the wheels turning made it a lot easier to go with them. We had to get rid of that because that then became a technical. We made the actors suffer technical problems a lot more now, I realise, than we ever should have. So all of that's gone. But it was things like not looking at the actor, can you look at the corner of the matte box? And that was so unfair because the real actor's sitting there within their eye vision, but they can't look at them because their eye line's got to go to the corner of a matte box. That was torture, I think. I realise now for any actor to have to go through that. Thank God that's all gone. Now we don't worry about the eye lines being so wide or even slightly different, which annoys me. But because I'm a bit of a continuity lover, and I do love the left to rights and the eye lines matching. So that's a bit of a bug. But we made the actors so uncomfortable in those early days. So I tried to get rid of as much as I could over the years. Multiple cameras occurred on Rain Man, and I never looked back after that I got into terrible trouble with societies that I was shooting TV for cinema. That was unfortunate, but I didn't believe so. I just thought we were making better films if we could cross-shoot. The editors loved it because one editor said to me, "I don't have to cut for continuity, I can now cut for performance." And I thought, better movie. No marks on the floor, 2 cameras over shoulder, cross-shooting. As I said, got in a lot of trouble about it, but a lot of the films still got nominated that I used multiple cameras on, so I don't know quite what the argument is.
That was going to be my point because I believe, like you said, it was Rain Man was the first movie you shot with multiple cameras, but you also received this nomination for cinematography for Rain Man.
Exactly. So I sort of threw all that away and just kept blazing on, hopefully making the films the way I thought they would help the most.
And I think shooting with multiple cameras is just very indicative of your philosophy of, I'm not here to photograph the film, I'm here to tell a great story. And I think that being kind of your guiding light is shown in the fact that you're using multiple cameras. It might not be the technical way to do it the best, but it allows you to capture, to your point, the performance, which makes the movie better, which allows the editor and the director to tell the story better when they finally cut the film.
Absolutely. I'm so into multiple cameras. The challenge for a lighting cameraman is to light every camera to look as though it was a single camera setup. And I've got to say, that's in a way what happened, because when you look at some of the multiple camera films that I've photographed have been nominated, then it must work to a degree. It is hard work. I had cameramen argue to me, well, it takes you longer to light for 4 cameras than it does for one if you did all the shots with one camera. And I'd say, no, it doesn't. Your brain takes in the fact that you've got 4 cameras. This fill light would be that person's backlight, and that fill there would be their key light, backlight. You just work it all out. It makes your brain work harder and faster, sure. But once you set the lights, and it doesn't take that much longer to set the lights for 4 as to 1 or 2, I just found that that was a silly argument in the end. It didn't work because I think if as long as your brain's ahead of your body, you've got to be, you've got to be 20 minutes ahead of your own body. That's where the secret lies. Same with learning to fly. You never take an aeroplane where you haven't been 10 minutes before with your brain. That I utilise that into filmmaking. the brain was always a day ahead. I think I annoyed all the guys, the gappers and the grips and the and camera crew with, now tomorrow we've got this and this and this and this and this. How are we going with that and that and that and that? And I was always trying to be ahead so that nothing went wrong. We had everything covered, and if something did go wrong, we were able to step sideways and quickly fix it in situ on set. So I think that's the answer to my argument to a lot of the arguments about whether to use multiple camera. With George Miller on Fury Road, he had one camera, would do the whole film. And of course, I thought, how could you do Fury Road with one camera? And it took me 6 weeks. I'd get out of the car every morning and I'd say, I'll set those other cameras up today. George will get some good stuff with those. And he'd say, oh, I don't think we need it, Johnny. We're going to do that and that. We'll do that and we'll do that. And I'd say, yeah, okay, but do you think that? Oh, I don't think so. So it took me 6 weeks. I think it was the tone of my voice. I got out of the car and I said, George, I'm setting the cameras up today. But I've got the crew, got the cameras. I'm going to set them up. Oh, okay. From then on, we used 3 and 4 cameras for the whole film, and he was so lovely because at the end of the film, when it was released, he was guest of honour with the ACS in Australia, and he said that David Burr, our great second unit cameraman, and Johnny covered it all completely. We did not have a single pickup to have to do in any of the setups of first unit or second unit during the shooting. We always found it somewhere in the 4 hours of, of visual material they had. They always found a cutaway that satisfied George.
But even though you finally convinced him to use multiple cameras, he tried to make that redundant, didn't he? By basically moving all the cameras in until they were right on top of each other, shooting virtually the same thing.
You've done your good research really well. He did. I think his mindset was one camera all the time. And even though he knew and wanted the other cameras when we finally got into that situation, he tended to bring the B and C cameras into the A camera. So they ended up 3 across it. Of course, you'd only use one, so it's a waste of money and time. So I did naughty things because I knew I was going to get a new life after the film anyway. But I'd pull out my cord and shut my monitor down so he couldn't see what I was doing. And I thought I'd get assassinated for that, but I didn't. He laughed. He said, "Did you really?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "I'd plug it in as you yelled action. I'd plug it back in again." But yes, that did happen occasionally. I think George's mindset of one camera was pretty strong from the get-go 10 years earlier. Doing his storyboards, he could see exactly what he wanted. And I knew that if a camera got what George wanted, then he was happy he had his film. What B and C were doing was added, and if he viewed it back and it was okay, then he kept that. But often we would shoot his one camera on what C camera might have shot, and we'd do it again. But it was no skin off our nose. It was just a bucket load of pixels went through the camera, and not like film negative, So I think it was a good compatible arrangement in the end.
Where does your opinion lie in terms of a movie should be shot on film?
I've got to say, in all honesty, all my films up to Fury Road were film negative, and I loved it. But I also loved the digital revolution. By the time we got to 3,000 Years of Longing, and I was using very up-to-date cameras, 4K res cameras, and I tried to learn technically what they were all about, but I couldn't do it. I loved the digital revolution as part of the filmmaking process, as does George. George would never go back to film negative. And I don't think I would either. I think the aspects of the digital camera are so amazing that film was a beautiful look, beautiful. But its limitations of how long you could run a shot, the dangers of damage to the negative in the camera, in the positive later in the laboratory, all of that has gone with the digital revolution. So I kind of feel deep down that the safety factors of the digital revolution, not only the fact that you can run for 10 minutes of film waiting for a stunt to start. Often now we rolled our cameras on Fury Road 3, 4, 5 minutes before the stunt because the cameras were in a dangerous area and we had to roll the cameras and get the heck out of there. But then it took that long for the stunties to get their equipment, far and then do the stunt. So on film, you wouldn't have been able to put cameras there. So for a film like Fury Road, terrific, but also for 3,000 Years of Longing, which was George's little film afterwards, I love the digital. Its low light level capture is amazing. I love that. But also the smallness of them, the, everything about them is, to me, is go. The quality, you can manipulate in post. You can get a lovely look in post by virtue of a lot of the software now that's available that can get it so close to the film look. You can even press a button and go to film look if you want, but it's not the best that we saw in our tests. But there's other software that you can make the picture look very, very presentable, I must say. So no, I wouldn't go back to film if I was continuing a life in film.
And on 3,000 Years of Longing, you shot on a volume, right?
Yes.
How did you feel about the volume? Did that change your experience on a film by not physically being in the location?
Oh, look, it did. Again, I'm into the fantasy of the movie making procedure of escapism for the audience, and to me, it doesn't matter how you do it. I mean, we used the volume on the bus scene, and the boys in post, music, I think it was, they thought it was real. They thought we'd travelled in a bus. And I thought to myself, well, if you can convince the sound boys on one of the best screens that you could possibly see it on that it was real, why do you need to go out there and drive up and down, close off streets, cost a lot of money, turn around, go back, do it again, do it again, do it again. It's silly. On the sound stage, you can do another take within 5 minutes. And if it's gonna look as real, what's the point? The same thing came up with, locations and, the use of, the computers in post of the locations. We were supposed to go to London and Istanbul, and we did do that. And we did our surveys. We found everything terrific. Talked to crew and terrific. Got back to Australia and COVID worldwide hit. We didn't go to those places. We set them up and did them in Australia, and we did them all in Sydney. And even at one stage, I'll admit, George is sitting there and the location man is looking for a street in London in Sydney, Australia. And up comes this photograph and George says, no, that's London. That's the shot we took in London. He said, no, it's not, George. That's Sydney. And he said, no. And that's how you can find it. You can do it. So we shot the whole of London and Istanbul in Sydney, Australia. So to me, the illusion of filmmaking can be so complete now with the help of digital revolution, fantastic production designers and set dressers, locations people. Fantastic. They can find whatever you want anywhere in the world, right here in this big city. And so why bust a gut trying to, I mean, you love to travel. I must say, I love traveling the world on film is a great way to travel. I'd miss that if I was going to go on, but I'm not.
I guess that's really film throughout history has never been capturing a reality. It's kind of creating the idea of reality, but you're still manufacturing it, whether it's on a soundstage or whether it's using a big light to create fake sunlight. Like that's all film has ever been. It's not actual reality. You are always have been and will always be manipulating reality when you make a film.
I so agree with that. And it also gets down to a lot of discussions I've had with cameramen from around the world. This incredible desire to make the photography perfect by picking lenses that do exactly what they want, cameras, all of that. I found, I think, in my learning that generally to an audience, it doesn't matter. I don't know whether I should be saying this. It matters, I think, that the cinematographers do it. That's great. But once you've done it, get on with making the film. And if things don't work out 100% photographically, doesn't matter. Because if you've got the audience where you want them, so involved in that film, I've made films where whole microphones have come into shot and they're still in the movies now because, now you can rub them out on a computer, but on film, you can still rub them out, of course, in post on film, but they're still in the movies, and I can see them every time. If I see the movie, I think, "Ooh, that problem's gonna come up." I can see it because I look there, but compositionally, the audience is over watching this corner of the frame because that's where the emotion is, and so they're locked in up there, and I learned a lot out of that. That, you know, you don't have to be too perfect about everything. As long as the film has grabbed the audience and they're in the movie, all they want to do is listen to the words, be emotional. They start crying, we've got them. And they're not going to see or even think about the quality of the lens or anything like that photographically. So I sort of think that you can often blast through sometimes, photographically a little bit like a broadsword rather than a saber, that the finessing of it might not be that necessary to maintain the film. So I do find that in the later stages of my work, I did find that was becoming a bigger and bigger mental issue with me about how good do we have to be to present an emotional film. And it came to me at the end, during the perfect storm, when we shot the storm sequence, and there was a woman sitting beside me. I don't know who she was, and in the theater in Los Angeles, a lot of people, full theater, and we started into the storm sequence. And I could sense she was getting agitated. And, she was sort of getting very sort of emotional about it. And then she turned to me and she said, "Can I hang on to your arm?" And I thought, "We've got her." And I put my arm out and I said, "Grab hold, hang on tight. We're going to go for a ride." And she went, "We are." I thought, "We've got her." And I love it that we've got her. She's in the movie. She's on board that boat. And that is movie making.
What are things that take people out of a movie? Like if someone's in the film, like you've got them there, what are things that break that immersion? What takes someone back from in this picture back into their seat in the theater?
Oh, look, a multitude of things. It could be continuity where they're both two people in an argument or emotion are looking in the same direction. The audiences go, I just think the audience's brain analyzes the virtual window that we've created and what we've created inside it. If they are inside it, then the police station should be over there. But if if the police car going to the robbery goes right to left to the centre of the screen where we're now at the bank, that's right. But if it went left to right and arrived at the bank right to left, then there's this sort of like, well, where was the... And to me, it's the million little things. It could be a lighting deal, like a bad lighting or a commercial-like lighting in a situation that didn't need it. It could be too much time in the edit per shot, like they get bored. Peter Weir once said during a shoot, he said, "You can never, ever let the audience get ahead of the movie, because if they can anticipate what's going to happen, your film's dead in the water. They're back eating popcorn." And so there's that one. There's like, and George Miller fixed that on Fury Road. He cut the shot so short that really it went into your brain. You didn't see it. It just went into your brain. And then you're on the next shot and it's in the center of frame. So you didn't have to move. So your concentration, you were there. So all of those distractions that can occur by, dare I say, bad dialogue, editing that is too long, too slow. The audience wants to get... Lovely example, Peter Weir, we're shooting Mosquito Coast in Belize in Central America, and we've got a 3-day scene where Ali Fox, Harrison Ford, goes down and he buys a boat and he fills it up with goods and chattels and food and stuff, and he's going to go up the river. But the scene before was in the hotel at night with Helen Mirren, and he says, "Honey, I bought a town." And she says, "Oh, where?" He says, "Up the river." And we're literally that night, Peter Weir cancelled the 3-day shoot of loading the boat on the wharf, getting all the kids together, getting them on, go doot, doot, up the river, dumped it all. Because he said the audience is already there at the town. And he was so right. He just cut to the boat coming up, the last bit. Boop, boop, there it is. There's the wharf. They're there. They're at the town, because the audience, he felt, had already gone there. And I love that. And that was a long time ago. So all of those little things that these great directors have tried to eliminate for the audience, keep the audience in the movie and keep them in the moment and not wanting to waste a moment, is so important, I think. And I think for me, Fury Road did it as a movie, and it all started a long way back with the lovely thoughts of Peter Weir and other directors in the making of films. That's why I think every film is a learning lesson, a great learning lesson from different directors, different actors, different story, different emotions. Everything about them so different that we cannot help but learn from each one. But we'll never make the perfect movie.
I was going to actually ask, that's a great note, because with technology, you might not be able to make the perfect story, but technically you can make a perfect looking film like you're talking about. You can take out the mics that are hanging in the shot, or I know George was manipulating his images so much by like taking one half from one performance and the other half of the image from another performance, like splicing them together. But I think part of the beauty of art is the imperfection, that it is made by humans. And do you think that we're almost losing that now with that digital revolution, because you can be so precise with everything? We lose a little bit of that magic that comes from humans making things and the mistakes that come from that?
Oh, I think so, yes. I think, it's much that you can sit down for 10 years and do a storyboard of a film and feel that that is the perfect coverage that the editor needs to make the film. But gosh, I've lived, I think, on what I called lucky mistakes in photographing a movie. A very simple example was Rain Man, where they get dressed to go gambling, and they come down the escalator and that hot light goes straight up their body. Now, that hot light was actually a mistake. the lovely gapper, Norm, went up there and he put a big light up there and he bounced it into something. I don't know what he bounced it into. But a bit of bleed light came out from underneath it and created that flare, basically a flare from the light up their bodies as they came down. And he raced down, we put the doubles through, and the light went up their bodies. And he said, don't worry, I'll get rid of that. I said, Norm, you get rid of that, you're fired. You're fired on the spot. You won't get any superannuation, you'll get nothing, you're fired. He said, why? And I said, look at it, it's gorgeous. They're going to come down gambling. And then the light just goes shing up their bodies. And that was one of the best lucky mistakes that comes to mind. But I've lived on them really, because you can design what you want in your brain, but when you get to a location, it's not necessarily going to be the same thing. And I warn people all the time that, you can plan till the cows come home, but when you get there and it's raining and the sun isn't out putting that lovely shaft of light through the window, what are you going to do? You're paid to make the best of it, so let's go. You've got to make the best of it. But sometimes the mistakes are the best.
Does that mean pre-production loses some of its importance?
Oh, no, never. I've always said that pre-production, you have to light the entire film in your mind in pre-production. And so when the mistakes happen, when you get out there and it's not what you wanted, you can step aside very quickly and realize how to do it and how you can do it and still make it presentable within the movie. Perfect example might be in Rain Man, we arrived at a scene on the road because we drove across America basically to make that film, and it was raining and it was an exterior scene. And I think Barry Levinson looked over the road and he said, try that old motel, really, low life motel. Try that. See if they've got a couple of rooms in that. We'll shoot it in one of those rooms, whatever's there. And we did. And it's a great little scene because the scene is the emotion, not the interior or the exterior or whatever. So if it's powerful enough, it's written well, and the actors are really sparking on it, the emotion's there. So it doesn't matter what your background is, really. You can put it anywhere, and that gets back to the lovely example that Anthony Minghella gave me of yesteryear when he was alive, and our son made a film, and it was a very technical film, and he just said to my son, he said, "It's fantastic. That film proves you know technically how to make a film. Now put two actors against a brick wall and make me cry." And that is filmmaking. So it really doesn't matter, in essence, where you are. It's the emotion of that moment is the most important thing, and whether that works.
How often do you reflect on your whole journey throughout your career?
Oh, a lot. More so now that I'm not in it. It took a long time and a lot of very hard decision-making moments to bail out because it's such a great industry to be in. I've met some of the most wonderful, beautiful people all around the world, and we communicate still, which is so lovely. And it's very hard to get out of it, and especially much that, okay, I'm 82, but people say to me, "You still get out of bed and stand up. Why don't you make movies?" And you don't dribble and, you don't dribble too much. So I often wonder why, but I know why deep down. I need, with my wife, lovely Louise, I need our lives now. The film life took so much time away from us and the children, and my house and home and my city and my homeland. I traveled the world, which was fantastic, but it was a sacrifice that had to be made by all of us. And I don't want that now. I want to be able to say, let's go to so and so when we want to and when we can. So I want to make that available now. So it was very, very tough, but decision made. I think anybody who can knock back George to do Furiosa has proved that, you know, they want their own time now.
Did you know 3,000 Years of Longing would be your last film?
I thought Fury Road would. I had basically decided to bail out before Fury Road, but I got a phone call and I thought I can't knock that back. Working with George, I also had a good feeling being in Australia and hearing all the vibes about the equipment and the building of 3D cameras. I loved all that. I loved that challenge of building things to make a film. And when I got the phone call, I couldn't resist it. But I enjoyed it to make Fury Road so much that when George proffered 3,000 Years of Longing, he said, I'll be doing that before any other Mad Maxes. So I thought he'd probably do 3,000 Years of Longing within a year or two. It was about 4 years, 5 years that he rang. So I was well into my new life, but I've promised to do it and I did it. And I love doing it. And I think it was a lovely little film. I loved working with Tilda and Idris. I mean, those two are just great. And of course, always with George. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. Absolutely. And I thought Fury Road was Fury Road, big action movie. Yes, great. But this is a lovely little quiet, emotional movie that's got a lot of levels in it that George built in with the script and two wonderful, wonderful actors and others, of course, but those two as the leads. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. Became great mates with Tilda. And so that's lovely to be able to feel that, Tilda Swinton is a friend. Is wonderful. It's a great way, and now I'm happy. I've got through the 3 years of, well, desperation of should I stay or should I go, and I'm good now.
Do you remember your last day on a movie set?
Yes, oh yes, yes. The crew got together and they made a lovely slate and they signed it and had to do a little speech and things like that. Yeah, it was lovely. I don't think, in all honesty, they believed I would bail out. I think it was like, "Oh, he'll be back again." But I didn't. I stuck to my word.
How would you describe the path up to this point? You started out wanting to be a cameraman so you could travel the world with someone like National Geographic. You didn't end up doing with National Geographic, but you certainly traveled the world as a cameraman. So when you look back on this journey, all the movies you've shot, the people you work with, how would you describe your whole career?
Oh, incredible. It's a tough industry. If you can make it and get your name going, it's fantastic. But it can be a struggle as well. I don't know what gets you up there, where your name is bandied about quite a bit, through the world, really. I mean, England and Europe, and I don't know quite how that happens, but when it does, it's magic. They look after you so well, but it's the excitement of making a film, you know? It's the excitement of working with actors, that I've been privileged to work with, and watching them strut their stuff in front of my camera that I'm operating. That is magic stuff, and trying to work out, how you can get that audience out of their seat and into the movie and make it great, it and you get paid for it. I mean, phew, it is. It's just incredible. But as I said, it can be a nightmare for some. The travel, the family life breakups born out of travel. There's a litany of disasters around me, behind me, of families, very sadly, that couldn't keep it together because of those, either the distances or the times. You'd ring your wife and say, "Listen, we're gonna go over a little bit. I'll be home about 8 o'clock," and you rock in at 4 in the morning. And your wife doesn't really know about the industry or how that can happen. I was lucky my wife did. She worked in the industry. She knew that I could say I'd be home at 8, but come home at 4 in the morning, and she'd understand, but a lot couldn't. So it's a tough industry, tough as all get out. But if you can make it work, it's magic. And the most magic, Jacob, is listening and watching people in an audience just get carried away or cry or come out and say, oh my God, that you grabbed hold of them emotionally enough for them to be emotionally enhanced, good or bad, but whatever is, and the magic when your granddaughter rings and says, during school hours and says, Papa, I'm watching a movie. And I said, you can't be watching a movie. Have you snuck out of school and gone out of the local theatre? You get back to school, you'll get into trouble. She said, I am at school. We're watching a movie at school. I said, what movie are you watching at school? She said, your movie, Dead Poets Society. I said, is it good? She said, oh, it's fantastic. What more could you ask for?
My final question that I ask everybody at the end of every interview is, what does it mean to you to do art well?
Jacob, I'm not too sure whether I did art. I hope I made films photographically. I'm not too sure whether I would classify it as art in my mind. It's a great question, actually, because a lot of people do feel that cinematography is art. And in a way it is. But deep down, I never thought that that's what I was creating, an artwork. I just felt that I was helping to make a film that people would enjoy in any way or form. I think I'll answer it that way.
I can understand that. I will say, though, I think I view you as an artist. I think some of the shots in your career, whether it be that shot in The English Patient where he's carrying her and it's through the plane wing, or I think the shot of yours that I've fallen in love with the most is that scene in Dead Poets where they run out to go to the cave for the first time at night and they're all in their hoods and they're running across the yard. That to me just like, yeah, just like perfectly encapsulated like the excitement of being young and that the world is there for the taking, and that seeing them running away from this, that just captured that so perfectly. So I think in my mind, I view you as an artist with some of the shots you've taken. I just think are amazing. And it's been an honor to have you on this podcast. And I really appreciate you for the time you've given me today.
Thank you, Jacob, very much. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast. And if you enjoyed my interview with John, do me a favor and send it to just one friend who you think would like it too. And if you want even more from me, you could subscribe to the Artwell newsletter at the link in the show notes. And now, go do your thing. Whatever it is, do it well.